Welcome everyone to Live with Crabtree Coaching Collaborative. I am so stinking excited today because I have the one, the only, the legendary educator, Mr. Ramez. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, but let me stop you there. I'm not the legendary educator. There is no legendary educator. It is everybody working together, all the legendary educators who form this, sort of hypothetical, epitome of a teacher who does not exist because we're always learning and we're always growing and we're always expanding and we're always, attempting to reach the perfection, but there is no perfection. And so as a legendary educator is the star that you're trying to reach, and you keep moving towards it.
Oh, I love that. So tell me, before we dive in, because I want you to introduce yourself, how'd you come up with the legendary educator? Just hearing that idea, I love it.
How I came up with the name or the
Yeah,
platform or
the name.
the name, it's not as exciting as the explanation of it. I took a marketing course called um, it was called Legendary Marketer, right?
Uh-huh.
And so as I was coming up with the names, all the names were taken. So I'm like, all right, I'll just grab this. I'll put this. We have Legendary Educator.
Hey, it works. I like
Yeah. And so now I've got this, sort of, climactic sort of explanation for it, which came after the fact.
Hey, it works. It's a great name. So tell our audience just a little bit about yourself and your journey in education.
Yeah. So I was a teacher for over a decade, and I was one of those teachers who just adored the classroom. Right? I was very passionate about the classroom. I was passionate about the topics I was teaching. I was in love with my students. I adored each one of them, for their own reasons. If they're challenging because of the challenge, if they were, excellent because of their excellence, if they were, if they were leaders to you sort of see them grow into their shell, right? And just every student had their story, and I loved each story. And so I was one of those teachers who just couldn't, who couldn't sort of wait until the next day to go back into the classroom at 7:30 in the morning. And then COVID happened, and as the world changed, sort of so did my path. I left the classroom. I went into the family business. I was absorbed in the family business, and I got stuck in the family business. But I still had all this sort of, I was still a teacher, right? I was not a teacher, by day, but my personality or my essence, my sort of raison d'etre was still an educator, right? So I came up with the idea of a platform for professional development for teachers, because I was also an instructional coach next to my teaching gig. So it started with a podcast, Legendary Educator Podcast, and it's growing into, I'm still sort of working on the details, but it's growing into a platform. I've got a book that's coming out in a couple of months called The Classroom Formula. I'm creating online courses that are going to be also live in a couple of months. So it's becoming a platform. Legendary Educator is not only a podcast and or a YouTube channel. It's becoming a platform. And the best thing is that, as I said, I'm not the legendary educator. Right? Yes, I've got my insights, I've got my experience, I have something to say, but I stand on the shoulder of giants. I stand on the shoulder of giants, as Newton said. I'm not the one, right? I do have, in my conversations with Mr. This and Mrs. This and Dr. This, it all comes together in this sort of melting pot of knowledge and experience.
I love that. And you're you're so right. There are multiple experts in the field,
Yeah.
so many, all of our teachers, and we're constantly learning from one another.
Exactly.
And I think that's what we all have to remember, whether you're in the classroom, a campus leader, a district leader, everyone holds expertise and we can learn from one another, which is so powerful.
Exactly. Even instructional coaches, they don't know everything, right? And they've borrowed and they've learned and they've taken and they've stolen and they've read and they've researched and they've had conversations, just like you and I are having conversations right now. And I learned from you, right? I did. I this is a follow up to an episode on the Legendary Educator, podcast, I learned a lot from you, right? I am not a legendary educator. I am still learning. I'm always learning, and I will keep learning, and I will never, ever, ever achieve the status of legendary educator, and no one will.
So, one of the things that you mentioned is being an instructional coach. And, it just sounded like you had an amazing relationship with your students when you were in the classroom. But we know that right now, a lot of teachers are struggling with behavior management. And as an instructional coach, what are some strategies that you use or that you've seen other teachers use that have been extremely successful in still continuing and supporting learning in the classroom?
That's a great question. So, actually, my take is before the strategies, right? It comes before the strategies. My take, which I will, I'll talk about in the book and I will talk about in the courses and I always talk about on the podcast, is the reasons, right? It is, if you know what the reasons are, sort of how to cater for them, right? If, for example, I always say every classroom it has a different kind of vibe, right? Every classroom has a different environment, right? You walk into the hallways, there's a quiet classroom on the right, there's a loud classroom on the left, there's a chaotic classroom at the end, right? And the weird thing or the fascinating thing is it's all the same kids, right? It's the same group of kids who are chaotic here and loud here and quiet here and then on task over here. So the idea here is, what is the conclusion of this? The conclusion of this is that it depends on the teacher, not on the students, right? It is all right. So I've got this sort of, I don't know, I'll call it like a buzz phrase, right? And I call it the 3 pillars of teaching, right? And the 3 pillars of teaching are, number 1 is you are the captain of your classroom. You are the captain of your ship. You've got the wheel, right? And you steer. And that basically means that you are responsible for everything that happens inside the classroom. It's not Johnny, it's not Sally, it's not the parents, it's not the administration, right? But you are the person who is steering your ship, right? And if you allow your students to steer it from you and take control of the wheel, you've lost your classroom. Right? And so basically you need to be responsible for your classroom. You need to be responsible for the actions of your students. You need to be responsible for your own actions. You need to be responsible for everything that happens inside of your classroom, right? And so that's basically pillar number 1. And then pillar number 2 is you always have to be prepared, right? And it's not only being prepared with your content and your materials and your subject matter, it's also knowing who your students are and their needs. And I guess not only your expectations, but also their expectation. What do they expect out of this classroom, right? It is being prepared of, what you're going to do inside the classroom, not only in the teaching and the lessons, but where you're going to go and the activities, how you're going to talk, how are you going to move, right? Always know what you're doing. It's not, going into the classroom and saying, I'll just wing it. No. You don't wing it in a classroom full of 30 hormonal human beings. You don't wing anything, right? You know exactly what you're doing. And number 3, which is basically, it's the foundation of what we do, is you never focus on the teaching. You always focus on the learning, right? And I always say, can you teach a monkey, Shakespearean literature? Okay.
Sure.
Can you teach a monkey Shakespearean literature?
No, you cannot.
You actually can.
Oh, you can?
Oh, you can. You can teach. You can have your notes and your slideshows. You can.
Oh, that's true.
And
yes.
You can talk and you can, do everything. And the monkey's going to be looking at you, maybe even nodding, right? But is the monkey learning?
No.
That is the question, right? Is the monkey learning? Are your students, so you can be teaching with your PowerPoints and your slideshows and your notes and your lectures and you're going on and on about the beauty of Shakespearean literature, and the puns and the metaphors and the, and the, what's it called? and the iambic pentameters.
Oh, yes. Ta-dun, 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 ta-dun.
Are your students learning? And that is where you have to shift your focus from your teaching. It's not about, it's not about you and your movements and your actions. It's about what they are receiving and their receptions of the information and the knowledge. And so those are the three pillars of education in my book.
Well, man, I mean, just looking at these three things, if you don't have this foundation, I see 100% opportunity for behaviors to become disruptive. If you don't have routines and procedures and high expectations like the captain should, chaos. If you are not prepared, chaos. Because they can sense it. They can smell fear. And if you're not focused on learning, students are going to feel defeated. And what do we do when we start feeling defeated? We shut down and we find something else that we're good at, which is probably disrupting the class. Oh, that's good.
Just like that dog right now. So, I mean, so let me take what you just said, right, and I've put it into the 5 keys of classroom management, right? I mean, and again, these are not strategies. These are explanations that you take and you solve in your way, right? If you want to sort of move from there and talk about strategies, we can, right? But you can't talk about strategies if you don't know what these strategies are solving in the first place, right? All right, so the 5 keys of classroom management is, number 1, you have no clear expectations, right? You may have expectations in your head, right, that you're aware of, that you may be like mentioned in passing, but if the students aren't clear about your expectations, then they don't know what to do. And then if you're punishing them because they don't know what to do, then what are you doing, right? And not only are they clear expectations that they know, but that are lost the word, that are consistent. That's the word, right? So you're keeping consistency of your expectations. Yes, you've presented them to the class, right? And we talked about them and we had a whole conversation about them, and then you forget about them, right? So you just lost your expectations because you yourself aren't, consistent about keeping them, right? So that's the key number 1. Key number 2 is you have no strong relationships with your students, right? If the students don't trust you, they are not going to learn from you. If the students don't feel that you care about them and you want the best for them, they aren't going to care enough to learn from you, right? So you have to work on the relationships with your students. Number 3 is your students don't care. And if your students don't care, that is sort of a danger line, right? That's a danger zone, right? Because, some students are like, I don't need school. I'm going to be the next Elon Musk, right? I don't need school. I'm going to be the next Mo Salah. I don't need school. I'm going to be the next, lead singer of Metallica. You know what I mean? So they've lost their way and they've lost their sense of reality, right? And they've got this whole other plan that is a 1%er, right? And so you need to, again, so from your strong relationship with them, you need to sort of, gear or shift them into the direction that they're supposed to be going.
Yeah.
And the key number 4 is, here's the big one. Are you ready? Students are bored. You're boring them. You're boring. Your class is boring, right? If they're bored, they're going to find something else to do, right? If you're bored, watching this video, you're going to see what else is on.
Yeah.
Right? And so they're going to shift. They're going to change the channel and see what else is on their phone, or with the guy sitting next to them, or with the girl sitting in front of them. They're going to find something else to do to entertain themselves. These are children, right? And by the way, these pillars of education and the 5 keys are for all grade levels, right? This is not a 100%. High school thing. It's not an elementary school thing. It is not, middle school thing. It is for every student, right? Every student in your classroom, every age level. Even adults, right? If I'm bored, I'm going to wander, even if it's in my head. I'll wander in my head and see what else is on in my head.
We'll all do that.
Exactly, right? And the number 5 one, which then stems into sort of several things, is students don't understand, right? If your students don't understand, they're frustrated, they are hopeless, they have shut down, they they're bored, right? They don't care, right? All this comes, from students don't understand. And so this is where active learning comes in and the differentiation comes in, all those big buzzwords that we always use. This is why we use them, because if your students don't understand, they're bored. If they're bored, they're not learning. If they don't care, they're not learning, right? If they think you don't care about them because you're not catering to them, they're not learning, right? If they don't know what you're expecting of them in the classroom, they're not learning. And if you remember, pillar number 3 is you're focusing on the learning and not the teaching.
Yeah. Well, and you said so many things that just resonated. And it really goes into, are you allowing the student to have opportunities to feel successful?
Mm-hmm.
And that goes in with, are you showing them the small wins? Do they feel safe to try new things with you? Do they trust you?
Right.
And that is huge. And oftentimes I do walk onto campuses and I'm working alongside teachers who just never smile. And I'm like, just at least smile. That, because if you look miserable in your job, the kids are not going to trust you. They know that you don't want to be there and they're going to be bored. And if you don't make learning relatable, students have to see why they're learning this.
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, I was taught English. I was an English teacher. And, I look at the way that I taught then and the resources that I used. And today I would change so many things. And I'm looking at what we do in our jobs every day and the things that we're consuming. I would teach students how to tell powerful stories,
yes.
how to market purposefully, how to show arguments and appeal to people's pain points with literature and with my content, with those standards. And so it really goes into, are we still teaching the curriculum of the past? Our kids are going to be bored out of their minds if we don't make it relatable to their world.
Exactly. And the content is the content, right? If you teach Romeo and Juliet now, it's like teaching, 100 years ago and teaching 100 years from now, right? It's the same story, right? It's as you said, it's how you take the literature, right? How you decipher it, how you use it into more sort of relevant areas.
Yep.
That's how you get them, right? Because you're not gonna, how excited, I did this, right? I did this because I was in love with it, right? I did talk about, the language and the iambic pentameter, which no one cared about, but I'm like, this is so musical. It's fascinating. How are you guys not enjoying this? You know what I did? Anybody? Yeah? No?
Let's talk about what 5 I ams really are.
Yeah. And the two kids who play instruments in the class are like, hey, I get it, right? Everybody else is like, what is this? What are we doing?
Why are you a nerd?
Exactly. But no, it's exactly what you said, right? It is taking the content and sort of differentiating it, towards each kid's, experiences, skills, what they enjoy, what they like, what they're into. There's so much you can do with any text.
Yeah. So if you're talking to a teacher that might be struggling right now, or an instructional coach struggling to coach a teacher through this, looking at the 3 pillars, where would you tell them to start? Like, what's your first baby step to getting on the right path?
Shift your mind, right? Did I say something wrong? I'm sorry. Was that a trigger? Don't shift your mind. I'm sorry. I take it back. No, you shift your mind and take responsibility, right? It is not, and stop blaming everybody, right? Stop blaming the parents and stop blaming the students and stop blaming the social media and stop blaming this, stop blaming. Everything has an effect, right? The entire outside world of your classroom, yes, they've got an effect, right? However, as soon as you enter your classroom, you are responsible for what happens in the classroom, right? And the second pillar, and being prepared, is how you do this, right? It's knowing your students, knowing their triggers, knowing what they're into, knowing how to use their, their skills, knowing how to use what they enjoy, knowing what they enjoy in the first place so that you know how to use it, right? You make a big wall around your classroom, right? And you kick out everything that does not belong, right? And you take responsibility over your classroom, right? And everything else falls, from that.
I love that. It really is a mindset shift. And when I work alongside educators in all roles who feel defeated,
Mm-hmm.
It helps, one, to have them take a pause. Like, let's pause for a second, deep breaths, and let's focus on what we can control.
Right.
And just like you said, that first pillar, you're the captain of your classroom. So what is it that you can control? And all those other things, don't give it the time of day right now.
Exactly.
That doesn't mean ignore it completely.
No.
But don't hyper focus on it. And preparation is going to help you with that.
Exactly. And you can control it by creating the routines and by creating your environment and by creating your classroom culture and by creating your expectations that, everyone is going to follow. As soon as my students entered Mr. Ramez's class, they knew what to do and what not to do.
Yep.
They knew what we were going to be doing, right? They knew, the vibe of the lesson, or that we're going to be doing this or that, right? They knew, right? It was not a mystery to them, right? If somebody asked, what are we doing today? I'm like, the same thing we do every other day, Pinky. We're going to be learning, right? We're going to be learning by doing 1, 2, and 3, which is what we always do because there are routines, because there's a culture, because there's an environment, right? And so if a teacher does not create this environment from the first day of class, right, from the first minute of class, from the first moment of class, right, it just gets exponentially harder and harder and harder as the days and the weeks and the months go by, right? And so if you want to talk about strategies, that's my number one strategy, right? Is from the first moment of class, as soon as your students enter, you create that culture, right? You create that environment. You create those expectations where they're like, okay, Mr. Ramez does not mess around. This guy, we shouldn't mess with him because he's one of those, right? But it's not like, I'm a dictator, right? I'm not a Nazi. We still have fun and we still do activities and we still learn, but there is a line, right? There is mutual respect, right? There's a mutual trust, right? I had the best relationship with my students, right? It does not mean that there was not that line that I don't cross it, they don't cross it, right? And that seed is planted from the first moment the students enter your class in September.
Yeah. And it's constantly like rehearsed and expectations. You said consistency earlier.
Yep.
I think there is safety in structures and routines, especially students that have experienced trauma. Those structures are essential, and it doesn't matter what grade you're in, they need it.
No. And I mean, like I said, these pillars, these strategies, these keys, all this, it's not a high school thing. It's not an elementary thing, right? Every classroom, it needs a positive environment, right? Every classroom needs a functional culture. Every classroom needs clear routines and expectations. Every classroom, any age level, right? And some people will say, especially high school, right? Others will say, especially elementary. No, it's every classroom needs all these things, right? They're kids at the end of the day.
So you asked me a question on your show, and I have to ask you because it's a powerful question. You meet a brand new teacher; they're about to go in the classroom for the first time. What advice do you give them?
I've always asked it. I've never answered it. What advice? I just said it, right? It is, you are the captain of your classroom, right? You don't let students take control of the classroom. You take control of the classroom, right? And then they say, well, how do I do that? Well, it is by setting your routines and your culture and your environment from the first moment of the school year.
Such great words of wisdom. Like if you follow those three things, you're going to be on point. It will be a successful year.
Yeah, and don't wait. Don't wait till the second week. Don't wait until the icebreakers, and don't wait until no. It's before you. I mean, it's before you even introduce yourself. It's before you say, "Hi, my name is Mr. Rob." No. Hold on. Right? And I've got this thing I always used to do. Right? And again, it's not my idea. I took it from somebody. I mean, as we always take from each other, right? At the very first moment of classroom, when the students come into your classroom, right? Because they're going to come in, disruptive and hyper and excited, and it's first day of class. All right. And you say, thank you for coming in, right? Everybody, I want you to leave the classroom, right? And stand outside of my classroom, right? In line and wait. And then once we enter the classroom, we are going to do it as quickly and as quietly as we can, and you find your seats and you sit down, right? All the students are be like, what? We're going to go outside again, right? Are you wasting time? I'm like, no, I'm creating, a routine that we're going to follow for the rest of the year. All right, so please exit my classroom and wait outside, and then come back inside as quickly and quietly as you can, right? And you're not yelling and shouting, you're just being as calm and chill as you can, right? And they do this, and they're going to fail the first time. Be like, all right, thank you very much for your first attempt. Everybody, please exit my classroom again. I'll wait for me outside. And then when I signal you, please come into my classroom as quickly and quietly. And they're going to fail the second and third times, but the fourth time, maybe fifth time, they're going to get it right, right? Now the second day comes. What are you going to do? You're going to be consistent. You're going to be consistent. Exactly right. Keyword here is consistency. You will do it again. And then you'll say, all right, guys, thanks for coming in, but I think we forgot what we did yesterday, right? So I need you all to exit my classroom. And then once you enter, right, and you make sure that you repeat the same words, right? You as fast as you can, or as quickly and quietly as you can, please enter my classroom and find your seats and get your materials out to start the learning. Right? And you keep doing this, and you keep doing this, right? And if there's a day where somebody forgets, be like, "Whoa, Mr. Da-da-da. Whoa, hold on. Please exit my classroom." Please, right? I know it sounds boring, and it sounds repetitive, and it sounds like, oh my gosh, I'm going to do this. Yes, you are going to do this. Right? I mean, this is my way, right? I mean, teachers have their own way of doing, of setting up their routines and expectations. This was my way. And it worked, right? Because then, the students knew. As I said, the students, like my students knew when they entered Mr. Ramez's class, they knew exactly what to do, and they knew what my expectations are.
Well, and if you don't, your life will be a little hectic later on in the school year. There is benefit. So whether you are teaching sophomores or kindergartners, it does not matter. Exactly what you did is how I started mine as well, because it sets your students up for success. It's a lot of work in the beginning, but it pays off in the long run.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
And that's how you set up anything, really, right? It's a lot of work at the beginning, right? I mean, it's the same way if you're teaching a new class. It's the same way if you're, if you're setting up activities for your active learning for the first time ever, right? Yeah, it's a lot of work.
You gotta go through it all again.
But then you've got a portfolio full, of these activities and ideas, and right. So it's always the first time that's the hardest. And I guess that is also, something I would say to the teacher going into the classroom for the first time. It's the first time is the hardest.
Yeah.
Right, because you have to establish, and you have to create, and you have to remember, and you have to plan, and you have to, which you don't have to do after that.
Yeah.
Right.
After you just stay consistent. I love this. This is great advice for a veteran teacher or a novice teacher.
Yeah.
Anyone who is struggling with behavior management or coaching someone who's struggling with behavior management. These are nuggets of gold. So thank you so much, Mr. Ramez. I greatly appreciate it. And so can you tell our audience, where can they find you? Because I know they're going to want to learn more.
Oh, I appreciate that. So you can find everything on the website, legendaryeducator.com. On there, you're going to find the links to the podcast and the YouTube video. And then eventually, if you want to join the mailing list, which I would appreciate immensely, because then I could update you on the book that's coming out in a couple of months, as well as any any new material or content that I'll be releasing in the very near future.
Yeah, I'm excited to get my hands on that book. That's going to be really exciting.
Yay.
So thank you so much, Mr. Ramez, and I hope you have a wonderful and fabulous rest of your day.
Oh, I shall. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.